Hello and welcome to the Rabyd Atheist. I'm Rabyd, a former pastor turned atheist, now compassionate anti-theist. Welcome to my channel. Feel free to like or dislike the video as you see fit, so feel free to hit those buttons. Feel free to comment below, and I would appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel and hit your notification bell for more content as it is released. You're also free to share my videos as much as you like, because the purpose of this channel is educational in regards to atheist and deconversion issues and any other issues related to those issues. A hearty welcome to the Rabyd Nation. Yes, I'll get to that at the end of the video. Today I want to kind of encapsulate or wrap up this series I've been doing on helping the apologists, and I want to kind of cap it off with the 5 reasons why none of these so-called proofs, arguments, whatever, for the existence of God convince me. Why am I still unconvinced? Okay, and so I'm going to give you 5 of those reasons. Now, this is kind of a summary statement, so I'm not going to get into the details of too much of every single argument that I've dealt with. You have the full playlist over my head at this moment, so you can go back and look through all my reasons why I think a certain argument is fallacious, or I think something is lacking in evidence, or whatever. These are the 5 summary reasons why I think that the arguments for the existence of God are a little bit problematic, and why I am not convinced by them. Okay? Number 1, I would say a vast majority of these arguments are fallacious. Probably the most common is the begging the question, where the assumption of God is assumed. I just don't find that a very good argument when basically you're saying God exists, therefore God exists. There's a lot of circular reasoning in this stuff. There's a lot of assumption that God exists before you even sit down to put together the argument. I think a lot of these arguments lack, any kind of, formal, real looking at it from a standpoint of, I think you need a lot more premises. And I think in the desire to become simple, some of these arguments just don't cut it. Okay, they might be nice soliloquies, maybe they do flow logically at times, but there's always this assumption in the premises of certain things that are assumed in the conclusion. And I just don't find most of them convincing for that very reason. And that's kind of, the beginnings of the woes for a lot of the philosophical arguments for the existence of God. The more I look at them, the more I think they're fallacious, or they have flaws, or they make assumptions, or in some cases I don't think they even really deal with the existence of God at all. In the case of the teleological argument, so what? There's a designer, but it's not a final or ending conclusion. Number 2, and this is probably the big one for the philosophical arguments for the existence of God, is a lot of these arguments lack soundness. Now, what I mean by that is, as one of my commenters pointed out, arguments are not evidence. But a lot of the premises in a lot of these arguments are assertions without evidence. Okay, there's a lot of things that are just stated as if it's a fact, and this not given a full breadth of any kind of evidence to support the statement. I think everybody's favorite toy these days seems to be the moral argument, but the moral argument is a good example of what I'm talking about. If you got, God does not exist, objective morality doesn't exist. Okay, objective morality exists, so therefore God exists. The problem is, nobody's conclusively proven that there's even a connection between the existence of a particular God and the need for objective morality. You've got that statement, but there's no evidence given to support it. How do you know God is connected with objective morality in the first place? What is all the evidence, all the work that puts that all together? And the second premise in it is objective morality exists. I haven't seen the homework where anybody's really proven that objective morality exists. Okay, so both of those premises, if you want to say true or false, you have to put a question mark there, which doesn't give us a conclusive conclusion. It gives us, well, if it's true, but we don't know that it's true. And that's just one problem. The Clum cosmological argument, various cosmological arguments tend to assume God, but the biggest one, they try to sneak, certain aspects and things about God in there. It's kind of funny because when I argued the moral argument, nobody wanted to define what the God is. Which God are we talking about? What are his qualities that lead us to assume that objective morality is connected to him? seems to be a lack of desire to suddenly define those attributes. But when we get to the cosmological argument, all of a sudden he's timeless and all this other stuff is kind of smuggled in, and it's not even part of the original soliloquy. So the problem I have at this point is the lack of evidence that support a lot of these, things. Is that true? Does, everything that begins to exist had a cause? Is that true? Don't know. There's just a lot of things that are unproven. They lack the evidence to prove that each of those things are true. Arguments are not evidence, okay? They're just a way of putting things so, okay, we know that this is not fallacious, but are the premises true? And a lot of times in these arguments, the premises remain with big question marks behind them or can be argued against. And so there's no conclusive truth value to the premises to even say that the conclusion is true. So the soundness is kind of lacking for me. The rest of the arguments fall into two categories. And so number 3, one of those categories is a lot of the arguments for the existence of God are God of the gaps. We don't know, so therefore. And the problem with that is the gaps keep getting smaller and they keep getting fewer. A long time ago, we believed that, lightning and thunder required some sort of storm god. Now we know the natural causes for that. As we continue to move backwards, we don't necessarily know, a lot of things, but the things that we do know are shrinking those gaps. And the funny thing about all of them is none of them require agency. I think what this is ultimately showing is agency is not required for everything to exist or to come into being or anything. It doesn't require agency, it just requires the following of natural processes. And so the God of the gaps mentality kind of turns me off because you're just basically saying, well, we don't know, so therefore God. And that's just not a good way to do business with me because I'm like, it doesn't assume God, it means that maybe we just don't know and we'll find out later. A lot of the other proofs for God, this is number 4, the reason why a lot of the other ones don't convince me is they're either predicated on some sort of belief that a person's interpretation of their experience is infallible, there's an incredulity about they can't be wrong, or that that those things can be explained by alternate explanations, such as healings and miracles. Usually you can boil it down to some sort of trickery, the placebo effect. The point is that when you argue from experience, your scriptures, or whatever, it all comes back to the fact that there's alternate explanations. The scriptures aren't necessarily inspired by God. In fact, I don't think they are at all. I think they're works of men who had different agendas for writing them than most people who use them today. And so all these other explanations or other arguments or proofs for God fail because there's alternative explanations. And so that's number 4. Number 5, and this is kind of a segue into what I'm going to be doing next in this time slot, which is there are very good arguments against the existence of God. Now, I haven't delved into this in depth, probably like I should, but it wouldn't matter, okay? Because the other arguments are unconvincing, I can still be an atheist, even if there aren't any good arguments against the existence of God. The proof for God is still lacking for me, okay? And that kind of leads into the idea of, do I take that next step of being the full, there is no God atheist, in which case I am at that point making a claim. Right now, I'm just saying the claim for the existence of God is lacking in evidence or proof, and it just doesn't prove anything to me. So we're kind of stuck at this point. So the last one, 5, is there are many good arguments against the existence of God. And I'm going to delve into those in my next series a little bit deeper, but the ideas of divine hiddenness and the argument of the problem of evil, all kind of, now not all of them get rid of all the gods, but they do get rid of some of them. And I think they create massive problems, okay? So you have those evidences against the existence of God, not just necessarily the fact that most of the arguments for the existence of God are pretty much a null for me. And that brings up another issue, because a lot of people will come at me at this point, well, there's a little bit of truth in all of these arguments or proofs or whatever. And my response to that is, no, really, each one of them has a big fat zero next to it from my point of view. And 0 times as many arguments that you want to make for the existence of God this way ends up 0. No matter, 0 is one of the most unfavorite numbers of theists, because the moment you point out that, if an argument's fallacious, it has 0 value. If an argument lacks soundness or can't prove its soundness, it lacks any value. Okay? All these other arguments, experience, doesn't prove anything except to the person that's there. Texts, things like that. The fact that we keep shrinking the gaps, all of these things slowly make all the arguments down to a nothing. And no matter how many arguments you have, if their value is 0, 0 times whatever number of arguments you want to lay is still going to be 0. And so I'm not convinced by any of this stuff. And my only real question at this point, and I'm going to be honest about it, I don't think I'm ever going to be given any evidence that's convincing to me. Now, here's the funny part for those of you who are theists and are classically theists, say a monotheist with the classical definitions of God. If that's the kind of God you believe in, then that God, nobody can really know, what would convince me. I don't even know myself sometimes what would convince me, other than I know that what have been presented is fallacious, false, God of the gaps, doesn't understand that there are alternate explanations, all that stuff. But I do know for a fact that if such a God existed, he would know what would convince me. And he would, or she, or whoever, would then present the evidence, if they really loved me to, that would convince me. And thus, God would certainly have the knowledge and the power, if we have classical definitions of God, to convince me, okay, and give me the sufficient evidence. But that hasn't happened. So that actually kind of stands in it all against that God existing. So the more I've looked at these, and this is a summary statement, if you want to go back to the specifics, look at any specific video, but I just don't find any of these as convincing. And I find the arguments against the existence of God a little bit compelling. I haven't really dived down. I haven't said they're convincing yet, but they're compelling. So how do you help the apologists? All right. Well, number one, if an argument is clearly bugging the question or any other fallacious nonsense, fix it. Okay, you got to fix it. Quit ignoring the atheist debunking of these. These things have been debunked for literally hundreds of years now. Okay, and you got to start listening to the ones debunking you and saying, hey, you know what, we need to come up with a better argument. But there hasn't been a decent, better argument for the existence of God literally in hundreds of years. And don't count the Coulomb cosmological, because it's just a cosmological argument with a few additions. Okay, it's nothing new. It's just been altered. Okay, and so that seems strange to me, that despite all the advancement of human knowledge, you can't come up with anything better. Number two, do the legwork. Get out there, do the science, do the psychology, prove that objective morality is a real thing. Prove it. Okay, prove there's a connection between this God you can envision and objective morality that requires this God's existence for both, and objective morality's existence for both of them to exist. Prove that. Prove it. Okay. Prove there's a designer. Okay, prove it. Okay. See, too many times I have watched these people, try to disprove, evolution, or try to disprove Big Bang cosmology, or try to disprove this and this, and it's like, you can disprove all of that, it still hasn't proven yours. Okay? You're the one making the claim, prove yours. Do the homework, do the evidence, produce the evidence. Realize that the gaps are shrinking, and you're going to have to find a gap that literally we can't conceive of a way to shrink. Okay, now, maybe that's our limited intelligence at the time, but you're going to have to make that stronger. The other thing is, understand there's alternate explanations for everything, and if there is an alternate explanation, then you have to go with the simplest answer, in my opinion, the more human answer, the more mundane answer, that's the way it could be. And I think you've got to realize that and get rid of some of these evidence. A lot of this hocus pocus and hooey stuff, you need to discard and say, yeah, that's not helping. And I think in this future series I'm about to do, you're going to have to really deal seriously with the arguments against the existence of God instead of poo-pooing them. I think that's good advice for the apologist. Now, as I said before, I don't think you can do it. I really think the apologetics world has become a bunch of defense attorneys that knows their client is guilty and they're still trying to defend him. Okay, I think they will say anything, do anything in order to get their client off, which is God, which is ironic as hell to me. But I think that's, I'm kind of done with that. So for me, I haven't seen any convincing evidence that would convince me to stop being an atheist. And I really don't believe I'll ever be presented any. Because if this is the best you can do in hundreds of years, apologists, it's sad. It's really, really sad. And you got to stop sticking your head in the sand and start listening to the people that are debunking your stuff and realize that they have a valid point and you need to fix it. Instead of using the same tired old arguments or continuing to present the same falsities that people have already addressed, actually realize, hey, I need to stop making that argument because that's a false one, and start finding arguments. Go do some new groundbreaking research because it's the only way you're going to fix it. Okay? And now I'm on to a quest. I've long joked that I'm a 6.9 atheist. Okay? It's funny. And it reflects the fact that I have never been really given, I no longer find any evidence for the existence of God convincing, and I don't think I'll ever be given any that will convince me. I could be wrong. And that's about as close as I can get to an absolute atheist that says there is no God. So my next series is going to be about, can the claim there is no God be proven? Can that be proven? And so I'll be going into that, and so that's where I'm heading next. But I'm going to close this one out, this series out, although if there's a new argument for God that somebody wants me to address or thinks I should address, just post it and I'll get around to it when I can, or when there's a moment to do so. But right now, this is where I stand. I want to thank you, everybody, for stopping by. I just wanted to make a quick couple channel announcements. I applied for memberships. They're there. I'm working on the levels. Hopefully they'll be out very soon, probably Wednesday or Thursday. I have to apply for each level and then have each level approved by YouTube. So that's kind of where I'm going with. I do know that the first level of membership to be a citizen of the Rabyd Nation is going to be a price tag of about $6.66 because it's funny. That's how I do things. I like irony and I like funny. So that's going to be the first one. The other two I'm debating with myself, and then of course the perks that go with that and all that. So probably the higher level you'll be able to see videos as soon as they're dropped instead of having to wait for the premiere. Things like that. I'm going to try to come up with good advantages that I can actually do. I don't want to disappoint you as the Rabyd Nation, but if you like my work and you want to continue to support me, financial support is probably going to be available fairly soon in the next couple days. So thank you very much. This is a dream come true. We're moving closer and closer to ad revenue. Every day I seem to gain more watch hours in the last 365. So, and the more subscribers I get, the more that goes up too. So thank you very much. Once again, thanks for stopping by. Like, share, do the things that YouTubers do. Make sure you live your best life. You only get one go around. Don't waste your time. Don't waste your money. Don't waste your energy. Don't waste your opportunities. Don't waste all the things that you can waste in religion. Instead, take all those things and focus them on making a better life for yourself and for the people around you. Thanks very much once again for stopping by, and I'll see you next time.